Welcome to Race to Win, a sailing podcast brought to you by racecues.com. We review 3D regatta replays and analyze racing tactics, rules, and winning strategies. My name's Jakin, and today's podcast is about sailing close to the wind. In my previous podcast, which was also from this one design race in Scotland, I showed how it's essential to stay in sync with the shifts. That means tacking on the headers and always staying on the lifted tack to minimize the distance sailed to the windward mark. On this podcast, I'm going to show you two boats that sail the exact same upwind leg, except that Bravo, in red, sails much more distance than Delta, in green. What's going on here is that Delta is sailing much closer to the wind than Bravo, though ostensibly they're both on a close-hauled course. Bravo is betting that the greater speed they get by a slightly wider course will make up for the greater distance they have to sail. And as we watch the separation grow between Delta and Bravo, we can see that it's really not paying off for them. Delta, with their very tight close-hauled course, is making ground up the ladder rungs much faster than Bravo. What's cool about this example is that Delta and Bravo sail essentially the same course. They both make 3 tacks on the windward leg, they tack on the same shifts, but throughout, Delta is really sailing a very tight close-hauled, and Bravo is sailing a very loose close-hauled, and it ends up hurting Bravo to the tune of several hundred meters by the time they get to the windward mark. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here and we'll be able to look at the entire tracks and you'll see exactly how much more distance Bravo sailed despite doing essentially the same course as Delta. Alright, here it is. And you can see that they're drawing a much bigger zigzag on their way up to the windward mark. If I click the Info tab, you can see that Delta sailed 22% less distance than Bravo for a total time gain of 2 minutes and 42 seconds, simply by sailing closer to the wind than Bravo. How much closer were they sailing? The next tool I want to introduce you to is called the trajectory lines, and it's found in the Settings tab just above the Separation tool. It puts on the display trajectory lines in front of the boats you've selected. And what's really neat about this is you can then click any section of the trajectory lines and see the angle and speed that boat was sailing for that part of the course. Here, Delta was sailing 53 degrees at a speed of 5.6 knots, and Bravo was sailing 41 degrees at a speed of 4.4 knots, a full 12 degrees lower. A little bit earlier on the windward leg, Delta was sailing 56 degrees at 5.3 knots, and Bravo was a full 16 degrees lower at 40 degrees and 4.9 knots. As we look at these trajectory lines, it's pretty clear that Bravo was also having sail trim issues because they were both lower and slower than Delta. One possible explanation is that their sails were trimmed for close-hauled, but as we can see, they were sailing about 10 to 12 degrees below close-hauled. That would stall their sails, stall the airfoils on the sails. They wouldn't be getting good flow over the sails, and that would explain their slow speed and low point. I think this angle really does a great job of showing just how much more distance Bravo sailed on that first upwind leg than Delta, just by virtue of sailing a much wider course. If you're not sailing the type of boat that has instruments to tell you what your ideal angle to the wind is for any given conditions, a good technique is to find a competitor before the start of the race and do a speed check. So make sure that you're both in clear air and see if you're able to point and maintain speed as well as your competitor. If you're not, you can know to adjust something with your rig or your sail trim before the race begins. That's it for this week's edition of Race to Win. Download Race Cues and check your upwind angles next time you go sailing. Thanks for tuning in, Leave us a review on iTunes, and don't forget to visit our website at racecues.com.